Hey, welcome to Neurosaucy. As a follow-up to my last video explaining the basics of demand avoidance, I want to continue talking about it by showing you what it's like to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I have a lot to say, but I'll try to make it as straightforward as possible. Hey, so I've been meaning to film several segments for days now, but I have spent those days with an ice pack wrapped around my head because migraine. So we're just going to do this podcast style, and you're going to get to see pictures of my adorable cats instead. I realized in the last video I didn't give a proper introduction, so here's an introduction and a disclaimer. Hi, I'm Avery. I'm a former teacher and a nerdy academic, and of course I'm neurodivergent. What I'm not is a mental health professional. I'm not specifically educated or licensed in psychology or neuroscience. This information is not a substitute for a consultation with a quality mental health professional. I couldn't diagnose you even if I had a license. Any video I make is based on my research, which I do as thoroughly and as ethically as possible, and my lived experience. Don't use this video or any video as your only source of information on the topic. There are some links to PDA and autism resources in the description, and I'm working on putting together a more comprehensive list of credible sources. Having said all that, let's talk about what it's like to have PDA. In case you missed my last video and you're wondering what demand avoidance is, I highly recommend you watch it first and then come back to this one. I'll put a link in the description and in the card at the top of the video. As a one-sentence summary, I'll say PDA is an autistic person's involuntary avoidance, the keyword here being involuntary, of the demands of everyday life, regardless of whether they're capable of doing those things and including things they enjoy doing. Let me set the scene for what my life is like right now. I'm sitting here writing this script after putting it off for like 2 weeks. I need to go pick up my car tabs because they expired like 3 weeks ago. I need groceries. I have a credit card payment that's like 3 months past due because I have to make a phone call to pay it. I have a million little things I have to do around the house that would probably take me less than 10 minutes that I just haven't done. I have unfinished creative projects that, no matter how much I want to finish them, have been gathering dust for months or years. It's been a struggle to make every part of this video. I haven't hung out with friends in months, even though I miss them. You might be thinking the same thing I've been thinking my entire life. What the fuck is wrong with you? None of that is hard to do. Why don't you just do any of it? To further paint a picture of how much demands weigh on a PDA mind, we're going to keep a rough tally of everyday life. If listening to this makes you feel some type of way, welcome to PDA. If you experience PDA, everyday tasks like cleaning, showering, eating, running errands, and sleeping, yes, seriously, can be difficult to impossible. The thought may fill you with anxiety. The second you think, I should, your brain tells you, nope, can't. Even if you're dirty, starving, and exhausted, it feels like you're trapped or there's a 1,000-pound weight on your chest. Because you know you have to do something, your brain locks up. No, it really doesn't make sense that such simple and important things can make someone anxious, but at times it feels overwhelmingly difficult, and you feel incapable of doing them. It can take someone hours to get out of bed and get ready for the day, and errands can be put off for days or weeks or months. Here's a list of gotta-dos to deal with on a regular basis. Your life may vary, but I'll use myself as an example. I don't have kids, but if you do, your list is probably a lot longer. Getting to sleep on time, getting out of bed, dressing, showering, making food 3 times a day, eating 3 times a day, housework, yard work, laundry, paying bills, making phone calls, going to appointments, feeding and caring for pets. I have 3 cats that I have to feed twice a day, and 2 of them get meds. I cuddle them, clean up after them, clean their litter boxes, and I acquiesce to their weird little demands many times a day. Grocery shopping, running other errands. Keep in mind that for me, at least, all of these exist in my head every day, all the time, even when I'm not actively doing them. I'm aware that they have to get done at some point. On the conservative side, let's say our daily task total is 30, not counting all of the subtasks involved in things like housework, yard work, and errands. If things like getting dressed in the morning are that hard, you can imagine that work and school, which are made up entirely of meeting the demands of other people, can feel impossible. Take a minute and think about all of the things that you have to do at work or at school. If you're neurodivergent, you probably instantly have a massive list in your head, but if you're neurotypical, maybe it's a little bit harder. Next work or school day, pay attention to all the things that you have to do that you have no choice about. This could be direct instructions from your boss or your teacher, or they could be unspoken expectations. I was a teacher until recently. There were a lot of things that I could control in my job, but there were also a lot of expectations. Allow me to share a list of things that I was contractually obligated to do. Choose course materials, develop classes that meet college standards, maintain an online class interface, keep a schedule, grade assignments and submit grades on time, give students feedback on assignments, hold office hours, communicate with students and colleagues, regularly review instructional materials, participate in governance, be available for meetings, professional development, be an academic advisor, fill out a bajillion forms every quarter, be on committees, with all that entails. Now, I did this for 15 years. It's not a matter of knowing how to do any of it. In fact, I was pretty good at most of it, but it cost me so much in stress, anxiety, and ultimately physical health. Grading and email were the banes of my existence. No one likes email, and a lot of teachers hate grading, but those two things caused me actual panic attacks. Every single time I sat down to grade papers or open my emails, I would get almost claustrophobic. Even sitting here now, I can feel my heart racing when I think about doing those things. It wasn't just one demand, it was as many demands as I had students and emails. Of course, the longer I put them off, the more the demands stacked up. Imagine you get 30 emails a day, which is no exaggeration, and you have 75 students that all have 3 assignments waiting for you to grade. On top of those 255 demands, you have to teach classes, students need help during office hours, you have a meeting in 2 hours that you have to prep for, you have that thing you said you'd do last month but still haven't been able to get to. You get the picture. Again, all of these things existed in my mind at once, every second of every day, including when I wasn't working. My job was complicated, but the list of duties in any job is often pretty long even if you don't consciously think about them. Our task tally is now 285. Everyone has probably said, I should do whatever thing you enjoy. I write fiction, I make videos, I make art, I kayak, I play video games. There are a lot of tasks involved in these hobbies. Just off the top of my head, here's a non-exhaustive list. In fiction writing, research, world building, outlining, writing, editing. In video making, researching, outlining, scripting, finding assets, filming, editing. In art, deciding on a subject, finding references, gathering materials, prepping materials, making the art, cleaning up. In kayaking, gathering supplies, loading the kayak and supplies, driving to wherever the water is, changing into my wetsuit, bringing the kayak to water, actually paddling, bringing the kayak back to the car, changing into regular clothes, reloading the kayak and supplies, driving back home, rinsing and drying off the kayak, and washing the wetsuit. In video games, it depends on the video game, but there are a lot of subtasks involved in that as well. This adds another 30 or so to our task list, which is now at 305. Social time is kind of unique. Sometimes you're forced to be social and sometimes you want to be, but either one can feel like climbing Everest to an autistic person. To me, it doesn't matter how long I've known you or how close we are, the demands of socialization cause anxiety. I love my friends and I trust them with my life. They demand nothing from me. The problem is that socialization for an autistic person is extremely loaded. Even as we're having a casual, low-pressure conversation, I'm thinking, was that a stupid thing to say? Am I being awkward? Am I being too quiet? Am I making appropriate eye contact? Am I being interesting enough? I have to focus on what they're saying, but there's a lot going on around me. What should I say next? What's my face doing? Do I look bored? Is my body language right? Being asked, hey, do you want to hang out, has always been mildly terrifying because all of those questions and worries jump immediately into my mind. Yes, I do want to hang out because I do love my friends. It's just that even a gentle invitation feels like being called to the boss's or the principal's office. And keep in mind, this is with people who know me very well and I'm comfortable with. When I'm with people I don't know as well or I'm trying to be social at work, I have to mask. If you don't know what masking is, it's essentially trying to look neurotypical. There are lots of reasons people do this, but the major function of masking is to smooth over social situations and not draw attention to yourself. I'll make a video about masking at some point. Masking is exhausting. It's like trying to be a different person, all to get along with other people. Even if you're neurotypical, I'm sure you've been in situations where you've had to act in a way that doesn't feel like your authentic self, like in a job interview. I mentioned in my last video that people with PDA often have a better sense of social situations than some other autistic people, but it doesn't make it feel natural. It's like wearing a bear costume and trying to socialize with bears without being eaten. That's a little bit of hyperbole, but not much. Socializing is extremely stressful and can feel dangerous. It's definitely demanding. Given that socializing often feels very high stakes, let's add 50 points. Imagine that you have at least 355 things on your mind at any given moment, not counting things people outright ask you to do. Imagine that they all feel like demands, like you must pay attention to these things or do these things. Maybe you've had days where you feel like if one more person asks you to do something, you're going to scream. Your day is completely taken up by things you have to do, and there's no space for you to relax or even to just be yourself. You just want to hide from everything and everyone. That's what every day is like with PDA. You can imagine this causes a lot of stress and anxiety and depression. To add insult to injury, I ended up with OCD, which I think is pretty closely connected to my PDA. I ended up on a lot of prescribed meds and I got into therapy, which has helped somewhat, but neither of those things make demands any easier to deal with. Anxiety is a hell of a thing to live with. It drains all of your mental and physical energy. There are lots of studies about how much of a toll anxiety and stress have on your brain and body. As you can imagine, this results in a very tired, run down, and often physically ill person. All of the usual advice about getting more sleep and doing physical activity seem impossible because, surprise, those are demands. So I want to revisit a topic that I talked about in my last video, which is the need for control. One quote from Reframing Autism, an organization in Australia, explains this really well. If a PDAer detects a demand in the environment, they will avoid it accordingly on the basis that the demand itself poses a threat to their freedom, which means it poses a threat to their sense of safety. Autistic people often feel like they have no sense of freedom or agency in our own lives. We spend our days dealing with things other people expect us to do, even if we don't fully understand why, and if we're not doing those things, we're thinking about the next time someone wants something from us that we may not be able to do. As we grow up, we often start to turn that inward, so much so that we start to demand things of ourselves. I should do this, or I need to do this is something that's on repeat in our minds. Should statements like this are self-critical, and we're already brutal self-critics. Gradually, this self-criticism puts even the things we love on the same level of potentially dangerous situations as the things other people demand of us. Hobbies can feel less like freedom and more like obligations or requirements. I'll use myself as an example. As I mentioned before, a lot was expected of me as a teacher. When I wasn't teaching or in meetings, I was always thinking about work I had to do or work I wasn't doing. I could never turn it off. Hobbies that used to restore me and make me feel more like myself took energy I didn't have, so they felt like work too. I felt guilty when I wasn't working, and I felt bad that I wasn't able to do the things I used to like doing. The I shoulds and the self-criticism just eroded my sanity and my self-esteem. The shame spiral kind of trapped me, and I felt like I needed to hide from everything. Objectively, I had a lot of freedom as a teacher in some ways, but it never felt that way. It was hard to believe I had much agency in my own life when there was always demands. The PDA part of my brain thinks that the only way to get any freedom is to just not do the things that were demanded of me or that I demanded of myself. If you think about it, PDA makes sense. Everyone needs agency and control in their own lives. When you feel like that control is under threat, you'll do what it takes to get it back. Sometimes it's possible to take control of a situation. Some people try to control what others do in one way or another. If that's not possible, it can feel like the only way to get that control back is to refuse to do the thing at all. I just quietly avoid doing things, but others can act out in ways that are socially unacceptable, like yelling, name-calling, or even being physically aggressive or violent. If that seems like an extreme reaction, it's because the threat feels extreme. I'm not saying that acting that way is okay, just that it's defensive rather than mean. People with PDA react out of fear. We can't control what our brain sees as a threat or how big the threat feels. Sometimes your brain literally can't tell the difference between opening an email and being chased by zombies. All of this is really isolating. You want to do things and spend time with people, but it's all taxing and terrifying, and sometimes it feels impossible. So let's go back to the questions you might have had at the beginning of the video. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why don't you just do the thing? I hope this sheds some light on why it's not just a matter of doing the thing. If someone you're close to struggles with these things, they're not being lazy or stubborn. They're dealing with extreme anxiety and they need your support, not your criticism. If this struggle sounds familiar to you, just remember it's not your fault. There are ways you can learn to work around your PDA, which I'll talk about in another video. But the most important thing is to have some self-compassion. If you can't do something, that's okay. If you can do something one day and can't do it the next, that's also okay. Thanks for watching. Please do the YouTube thing, like and subscribe and share with anybody who might find this helpful or interesting. Leave me a comment too if you want to share your experiences or if you have any questions about anything I've said. I'll try to address them in a future video. I've got a lot more videos planned and we'll get those out as I work around my own PDA. Bye.